what are we talking about today?
I don't know. I hear
You
the
tell me.
rustling. I hear the rustling.
In the bag, what have we got?
And
Talking about sex in long-term relationships.
ooh.
Let's do
Interesting.
that.
Talking about sex in long, so specific it is. Oh my god, who put that topic?
Long distance or long
Long term.
It says long-term.
All right.
Talking about sex. I hope people are doing that. Long term, especially, right?
Right.
It can change. I believe it changes.
I mean,
How? Like, what do you mean?
I think it's you have to put a lot more effort into keeping
Yeah.
it spicy and keeping
Yeah.
putting effort into it.
Mm.
You know, it's not all just like just tear your clothes off kind of mode.
Mm.
So I think it does change. I think folks do tend to get a little
Yeah, complacent.
complacent. That's the right word, or non-sexy
Right.
because familiarity breeds contempt.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I wonder also whether you don't, like, do you just not need it anymore? Do you just not need to have sex anymore?
Oh, because you're satiated in all other spheres. Is that
Yeah,
what
or
you're
you're just so
saying?
used to just being partners. Or, I mean, I'm thinking
think there's a
specifically, yeah.
Certainly a nice spin on the situation. So I'm wondering,
Well,
for those for whom it's not a spin, amazing, great, you reach the next level, intellectual level of love, of what Plato would call platonic love, capital L.
Yeah, I feel we sort of like jumped into the second part of the topic already, like long term.
Yeah.
But just talking about sex in relationships.
Is that the way it's written?
No, but I'm just thinking.
I like that. Let's
Yeah.
do that. That opens up a lot of
Yeah.
spaces and
I mean, of course, we
thoughts
will
to
talk
come
about long
out.
term, but that's like a later.
yeah, just in
Yeah.
relationships.
Talking about sex, like.
sure. Does it change? Well, how has it been for you
Yeah, I mean, I think
in life, just in general, when you've been in a relationship?
for me, sex was a really big part of, like, just wanting to be in a relationship also, like, in some sense, because it felt like it was both, like, it was being in a relationship at the same time, but also this whole hiccup with sex that I've had for a while and not being very comfortable with it, or not having any positive experiences with intimacy, casual or any kind. So for me, it became extremely important that as I was dating someone, I was testing them in terms of how comfortable they were about talking about sex, how comfortable they were with the topic. You know, would they just be like, why are we talking about this? Because I have had partners in the past who, when you start talking about it, would be like, oh, stop talking about it. It just kills the
Oh,
mood.
really? Okay.
Like, it just kills the fact that we're now gonna actually have sex. But it was very important for me because I felt like I had a lot of questions. I wanted to be extremely comfortable. I wanted to ask questions in the middle of of doing something if I felt like it. And so it was very important. So yes,
Yeah.
for me, this was a big part of the starting of a relationship, and if anything, became a bit of a test to see how open my partner
Yeah.
would be, or this potential partner would be to this, because I knew it was going to be a long process. It wasn't, as we kept dating, I was sure that I would ask many, many more questions,
Yeah.
and talk about it. So yeah, it was important to me that the partner was comfortable with it, because I've met many who aren't.
Interesting. Like, for me, at least, I mean, I won't speak to the relationship part of it because I haven't been in like too many relationships.
Long-term committed.
Yeah, but just talking about sex, I think spices a lot of things up. I mean, even when I'm with someone, I'm talking about previous encounters or whatever, sharing stories, and they're sharing stories. There is a lot of like knowledge sharing happening, and it's really fun. I think it's there's a lot of like new things you learn, and it tells a lot about what people are looking for in such encounters. And I kind of really remember this one hookup, if you will, where we were talking about our experiences about sex in general and what we like and all of that. And then the conversation led to, what haven't you tried? And then it ended up us going into a pool and then trying to kiss underwater because it was something we hadn't tried, and the person was teaching me how to do it. So it just became this, I mean, it was not like, I mean, it became very romantic So I think talking about sex can lead to different kinds of places in the conversation.
Yeah, and talking about things that you like and that you don't like. I think that's also really like having that space.
Yeah.
Where you can say, oh, I really like this, or I don't like this. You know? Yeah, and to have that atmosphere. I thought it was very important for me. It still is. Even 2 years into being into a relationship, it still is important.
Yeah, and I think somewhere this could be happening in pockets, because I think the whole point of why we started this whole podcast was people are not talking so much about sex. Right? I think when we spoke to some of our friends, the conversation was they were not having these conversations with their partners, and it was this thing that everyone knew they wanted out of a relationship, but it was something that happened, and if it didn't, they wouldn't sit down and have a conversation or whatever, right? So I think just the lack of conversation was what triggered us to build this podcast. So clearly, I think, well, yeah.
So I like that you brought focus to that, Mojo, because the talking about of it has been the X that we're trying to solve for, and I have found talking about it openly and honestly about it being very liberating, and how else can I put it? It's been liberating as well as satisfying. This is starting college days as well. And it's also instructive in that you learn about what others are going through, or how it then starts melding with the emotional side of things, how it affects different people differently, how some people can just simply enjoy it for what it is, versus for some it enhances XYZ or detracts from XYZ. So the conversation has been a great, way to decompress. And it's often been with just girlfriends, because in those days, it was really just your closest friends. And I love that it's changing. I love that I sort of bring that sort of candor. Because of those experiences, I can bring that candor to any new friendships, and whether or not male, female, whatever, or whatever gender you may identify as, and just striking up and talking about it, and therefore normalizing it.
Yeah.
So one of the ways to take that stigma out is just to talk about it like as if, like duh, like nobody's even commenting that we are starting this topic and making a big deal out of it.
Yeah.
And it's been sort of liberating experiences for others, in fact, who've been less exposed, perhaps fortunate to have a safe space to discuss these things, right?
Absolutely.
Right. And I think, even expanding it as you spoke about with friends, or even with family, like this, your mom or your siblings, to talk about, okay, what do you mean by safe sex? Do you even understand what's happening? I don't think, at least in my family, we never had that space where we could talk about sex. I don't think we even knew what the different body parts were, what a clitoris is, what a penis is. Like, it in just biological sense. But
like
what
a
does it
2D
mean?
diagram in your biology book.
Yeah, but what does it actually mean when it's two individuals together? I guess we always, this sense of it's a taboo topic. You don't talk about it with anybody, even your partner. I often wonder, did my mom and dad ever talk about sex?
Yeah.
Does my mom ever tell my dad what she enjoys? I just, I don't know. I don't know whether they do that or not, but I know I was very uncomfortable, speaking about it to anybody. Including someone that I was willing to be naked in front of. So, just imagine generations before us. But I am so happy that we're living in a world now where at least we are able to speak about it a little bit more. There's more information out there. Yeah. And yes, we started this podcast because we felt like there isn't much conversation around it. But I think at least we have the liberty to do this and speak openly about our own experiences and challenges. I also feel, especially where there's a lot of abuse, and many individuals have been through abuse when they were children, it becomes more critical to have a space where you can talk about that, because those experiences just give you such a negative sort of understanding of what sex is, right? And there is so much pleasure and happiness out of it, but you grow up thinking that I just don't want to be involved in this because of past memories. I know it's taken me a long time
Mm.
to come out of that.
Yeah.
And when I was 8,
Mm.
my first kiss was when I was 30.
Mm.
That's many, many years later
Yeah.
because I just
Yeah.
wasn't comfortable
Yeah.
being touched, nothing. I
Yeah.
just couldn't. So
Yeah, it's amazing, like something as complicated as or complex as sex, right? Because we're all different people, we like different things, we don't like different things, and all of that. And just the lack of conversation kind of like boggles my mind, because how else are people dealing with it? Because then they could live a life thinking something is wrong with them, something is wrong with their partner, and things like that, right? I mean, yeah, I think we live in very different times. I think otherwise for people to even address, and it's very subtle conversations. I mean, it's like something I enjoy or something I really that grosses me out and turns me off, and just mind blocks, right? That you have for certain things. Just and a lot of times you can feel that, oh, something is really wrong with me. Like I remember this one time. This phase when I wasn't enjoying penetrative sex, to a large part I don't enjoy even now. So I knew it was painful and all of that, but certain instances I've enjoyed it. So I had this weird thing like, what is wrong? Like maybe it's something wrong with me and all of that. And I was chatting with a friend, and the person was like, "Hey, no, I mean it is painful. So that's why when the other, it's all as much the other person's responsibility to make you feel comfortable." And
Do all
go
that's
easy,
required, yeah.
all that's required to ease you into it. So don't take it on yourself to make this pleasurable for everybody else, you know, things like that. So I think there is a sense of like solidarity, whatever, that you build by sharing your story or just having a conversation with a friend.
And now more so, I think, in a long term, to come to that piece of it, in a long term relationship, I think it's a major red flag if that's not happening. A sense of solidarity, a sense of community, like that I'm being heard, I can say what I would like without it being, as Pixie said, branded as, you know, killing the mood, which is such a massive red flag. And that's happened to me as well. And I remember just laughing because it was such a I want to call it theoretical, like case study kind of thing. Like you're like, oh, if this happens, then, you know, just like, oh, people are known to do this, and make the other person feel like something's wrong with them, or to communicate is not a good thing. In fact, whereas everywhere else you're hearing people, you know, the clarion cry of like, communicate, and all of the magazines and everything, you know, it's also become fad, and it's like, communicate what you want and stuff. And so it was just so funny when that happened. I just started laughing. And of course, as we well know, that in turn made this person actually uncomfortable. And this time I was like, well, I'm going to own this. This time I did it on purpose to make you uncomfortable. The laughing bit. But the communication, but wow, I just realized that maybe there is a way to do it. Maybe and it made me think about, are there moments where should you talk about it before? Should you talk about it after? Like notes for, okay, for next time, maybe I'd like it this way. Or like, when should you place it? Because perhaps there are moments where, I was just being honest with myself, even though that moment I had laughed, but I was thinking, well, you know, Cherry, perhaps there are moments when that should happen. So I wonder if that would work better in a long-term relationship, because you've had so much time to get to know each other, because it's not just about sex. There's a partnership, and there's just one of the ways y'all are showing affection through sex. Otherwise you show it through all these other languages of love. And so, yeah, do you think there's a timing to when to talk about it, or during it when to talk about it? And does that change if it's flash in the pan versus long term? What do y'all think if you put yourself in that position?
But I can also empathize with people who don't want to talk about it during the act.
Right, yeah.
I certainly sympathize. I don't know if I empathize.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not feeling what they're feeling. I'm like, bro.
Yeah, okay.
Get it together. Okay. But I see what you're saying. I sympathize. I get that it can be frustrating sometimes. But, But what else? What were you thinking? You empathize with them, and then...
No,
so
like...
when is a good time?
I don't know. Like, I was thinking
Should you say, stop, I'm not enjoying this right now? Or those are clear cut, right? That's black and white. Like, if you're not enjoying, in pain or whatever, then you gotta stop. But if it's like not really doing, like it's nothing dangerous or anything,
Yeah.
but it's their super intuition. And you say, hey, can you just move a little to this side because that would hit this spot for me.
No, yeah.
That should be communicated in the moment, right? What else,
Yeah,
what
yeah.
else
No,
is
that's
going to
true.
work?
Or there's also like non-verbal communication, like moving someone's hands where you want
Yeah.
it, and like all of those kind
Sure.
of things also.
Yeah. No, that kind of
Yeah.
communication, I totally am with you. I'm just thinking like intellectual conversations, but I can understand that some people might not want to do it during the act because there's so much feeling that's already happening,
But what?
like your sense.
Oh, you mean like an intellectual discussion on sex?
Yeah.
Acha.
Right, because that could also be communication. Because for some, it'd be major KLPD. They don't
That
want
I
that.
agree with. I think
Yeah.
I think the way I'm reading this prompt is
Mm.
about
Yeah.
talking
Essential
about
communication.
sex. Yeah. So you're right. I think the way what you're saying is how the prompt is written is that, or the idea is discussion point is written is that we're talking about sex as in like our sexual life, our sexual health, those kind of more intellectual
Yeah.
discussions about health and safety. and
Let's sit down and have a
pleasure and all
conversation
that
about
stuff.
sex. That kind of thing.
In that sense, sure. I
Yeah.
don't think we need to jump into a little lecture series while, things are going in and out.
Here's my TED talk. Yeah. No,
gosh.
I can now. I'm also kind of thinking like this whole lure of sexting is also a form of communication
Yeah,
where
yeah.
you're not in the act but kind of telling what you want, what you don't want, all of
you
those.
really,
right?
really want.
What you really, really want. Yeah. So
Nothing.
yeah.
Side note.
So that's communication of another sort as well.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, of course. The whole intellectual side of conversation, I think, yes, it happens, and in a long-term relationship, like, how much to continue to have it, like, is it just understood, or do people just feel like we understand each other, we understand each other's body, but that may not be true. But I guess in the moment of the act, like telling people whether you enjoy something or you don't like something, or I remember this one incident where I was still relatively inexperienced in this space, and I remember the guy actually just told me, like, you're in the middle of an act, like, you're stiff as a log. And I remember thinking in that moment, I think I just continued, but I know after that, that sentence really like hurt me. And I wondered, like, that there must have been another way to communicate this without having to like state this out loud and say it this way. But then I wonder, but maybe this was just this person's way of communicating, saying that, this is not working right now, because I'm not getting the response that I need to get me going either. So and I don't know whether there's a right time or a wrong time. I don't know, but I definitely feel like there has to be more communication around sex and anything that happens in that moment, either before, after, whatever, but just
But Pixie, I don't think anyone knows, and I don't think we can start drawing lines because that's a slippery slope, but we feel it. At any given moment, you can feel like that was not the right way, or that wasn't. It's
right.
So I think something that we just get a sense of in that moment. And in this case, with the comment that the person made, it's completely inappropriate. Like, there's just no two ways about that. I don't know if it doesn't matter what your sense of communication. But I think what it brings us back to is, if it were a long-term relationship, that would just be even bigger red flag, because you should. One imagines that a couple or triple or whatever system you're in are open to communicating on whatever is in their life, whether it's finances, rent, or whatever, puppy, whatever the frick, right? And sexual health and well-being is a part of that, because when you have a healthy sex life, it's actually great for the relationship. I'm going to say not an assumption, but something that empirical whatever data or stories show us, or experiences show us. So I think in a long-term relationship, for me, rather if it doesn't happen, it's a major red flag. And I think for my part, I'd like to imagine myself to find a person who would be comfortable doing that, as you said, Pixie, earlier.
I'm just reminded of this really funny story of a friend of mine who's been married for many years, and they've been married for so long that I don't like. It's not like they don't need sex every night or every week. So they've created this system now where they communicate with clothing. So, for example, if one partner is home early and they want to have sex tonight, they go to the drawer and take out, like, let's say, a pair of boxers that they both know that that's their sexy boxer, like that's or a piece of lingerie, and put it on the bed and be like, I want this tonight. And I found that really a very subtle but very respectful way of just communicating what they want to each other.
I like
right?
it.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And this is, and when I was speaking to that friend of mine, and she was just like, that's just how we don't actually want to tell each other that we want it, but we're using signs and different things that tell us, tonight is
awesome.
Is that night.
Yeah, and the classic scenes we see in movies, right? When one person wants it and the other doesn't want it, like turning away and feeling I'm tired, whatever, and like not making the other person valued or heard. All of those are classic cases. So definitely communication. There could have been better communicative skills.
But no, in this case, the story, the talking that we're talking about is the fact that they discussed that's what the boxer would need. That meta discussion is the sex talk.
Yeah.
Right, about how do we want to communicate? All the meta stuff, like how do you want to signal it, or how would you want to hear it? That's really cool. That's a really cool thing. I think I'd like to use that.
Yeah. Yeah. Because especially when we're talking about long-term relationship, I mean, you need this communication to even understand what else to try. Because after a point, I can imagine that it will get boring.
Right.
Right.
Also, like, I was just thinking of situations where one partner doesn't want it and the other one wants it, right? You alluded to that. But like respecting the need for someone to not want it also. And I think that's also extremely important, to have a safe space enough where you say, no, I'm tired, I don't want to do anything tonight. Yeah. And the other partner being like, yeah, okay, get it. And I know the first time I did it in this long-term relationship, I was hesitant to say no because I didn't know what would actually happen. But then I just said, oh no, I don't want to do anything. And it actually was very empowering to me to be able to say, nah, not into it tonight.
Yeah.
And it made that moment all the more special for our relationship.
Absolutely. I think there have been instances where I've given hints that something is going to happen and then not feeling it. Where I've been like, hey, listen, is it okay if nothing happens, and all of that. And I think people have been very receptive and okay to have that conversation. So yeah, and
with minimal judgment, I guess. Like,
but it'd be interesting to be with somebody who has not ever had that experience of talking to peers about it. And so what do they bring to the relationship? And the relationship as well, it sort of seeps into the relationship as well, where one person wants to talk about it, the other one sort of shies away. And I think what are ways in which to start making that person comfortable is something to think about, right? Because they're just not used to doing it. They don't understand the mechanics of such a conversation. So which is slightly, I mean, that's the kind of thing that we would just love to have a magic wand fix, correct? Like, that's why we want to have these conversations, invite people to these conversations, make them feel like they have a space that they can listen in, tune in, and feel like they're having that conversation. And so hopefully we can do something to
about that.
Invite someone who has never done that before, and demonstrate through action that safe spaces do exist. And that if you don't find that in your own partner first, you can always, there are other places you can seek to have those conversations.
That's so right. I remember I was struggling with this whole concept of virginity, and I didn't really know who to talk about it, because whoever I spoke to would give me their view, but I also felt judged with the questions that they were asking. And so, but I really wanted to talk about it, and I wanted people to talk to me about it. And I wrote this article on a platform, and I was amazed by the responses I got, because there were people who were sharing their own stories of how they dealt with this idea of virginity, especially when you're a lot older and people expect you to be experienced. And yeah, like there was this platform, and I felt really safe to be part of a platform that allowed me to have this conversation, but also the fact that people shared. And I think from that moment on, I think it must have been 3 years ago. Was it? And just then noticing that people do want to talk about these things, and they want to share, and they want to at least start a discussion around what are some of these questions, and how do we actually define all of these things for ourselves. Because it's all how you make meaning anyways, and just this idea of what does virginity mean. Each individual who responded had their own meaning around it. But I think you're right, Sherry, that bringing in people who never had an opportunity to have this conversation with anyone, and demonstrating that there is a safe space for this.
And some of my friendships have really opened up because of talking about this, right? Because I think we're all leading our lives, I think very similar sort of experiences, but also very different kinds of experiences, but just not having people that you can talk to and share. There's so much to learn from each other. So I think some of my friendships have just gone to another level just because I have opened up and they have opened up, and there's another level of friendship that's kind of
and a relationship.
Relationship.
This is a long-term relationship.
Absolutely.
Just about to say that.
Oh my god, we are meta.
Always been meta. Well, with that, here's to more safe spaces and to many more such opportunities for us to have these conversations and unbutton away.